In 2004, Solucar began construction of the PS10 plant, a solar power facility in the Andalusia region of southern Spain. The plant is designed to produce enough electricity for a medium-sized town. A 115-metre power tower is surrounded by a field of 624 heliostats, special tracking mirrors. The plant has the potential to generate energy for the whole of Spain. The sun's rays hit the mirrors, which reflect radiation towards a receptor located at the top of the tower. The water in circulation through the tower heats up and turns into steam. The steam operates a giant turbine located at the base of the tower. The water is then cooled and condensed, so most of it can be used again to recirculate within the system. In a few years, PS10 will integrate with a grid of several plants in the area that will generate 302 megawatts of electricity, enough to power the city of Seville. Andalusia has an abundance of sunlight. That sunlight cannot be exported, but the energy it generates can. PS10 will cut the emission of 18,000 tonnes of CO2 to the atmosphere, thus helping Spain to meet its emissions quota as assigned by the Kyoto Protocol Global Agreement. Kanagawa Toshikotsu has just taken delivery of several of the latest versions of Nissan's X-Trail hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. Each X-Trail FCV employs an original Nissan fuel cell stack and compact lithium-ion batteries capable of delivering the same level of performance as the petrol-powered X-Trail. Nissan's original fuel cell battery delivers an enhanced power output of up to 90 kilowatts with maximum speed and acceleration on a par with the conventional petrol engine. Fuel cell technology provides zero-emission motoring. The only byproduct is water vapour. When the system is stopped, the water collected in the tank is released. While running, no fumes are released, only small drips of water. Nearly all the world's major car makers are testing hydrogen-powered vehicles. However, hydrogen fuel cells may not be the solution to reducing carbon emissions. The fuel cell vehicles themselves only emit water vapour, but energy is needed to create the hydrogen, and that often comes from the burning of fossil fuels, resulting in carbon emissions. A new project at Bedgebury Forest in southern England is using wood to provide heat and hot water to its latest buildings. Wood burning currently supplies just 3% of Britain's energy. The new strategy could benefit 250,000 homes out of England's 20 million households. Bedgebury Forest has over 80 hectares of chestnut coppice trees. The amount turned into wood chip to run the boiler is less than 1 hectare per year. All over England, there are hundreds of thousands of tonnes of woodland that is unused or neglected, and the project is keen to show how landowners can make better use of this resource. The new wood-burning boiler has been running for over 12 months. It provides all the heating and hot water for the Bedgebury Visitors Centre. It requires a cubic metre or 9 bins of wood chips per day. The burning of wood does not add to greenhouse gases because the growth of new trees mops up the equivalent amount of carbon dioxide released into the air. Compared with Europe and Scandinavia, Britain has been slow to realise the benefits of using wood as a sustainable energy source. With this project, the government hopes to educate a new generation of consumers and tap into a natural resource that has long been neglected. Laser corrective eye surgery, LASIK, is now being performed on armed forces personnel. It helps with battlefield marksmanship and improves safety on the front line. The man who spearheaded the LASIK program and a pioneer in refractive eye surgery is Dr. Steve Schellhorn. For the past 10 years, he's been providing LASIK corrective laser eye surgery to all military divisions. It was only recently that the technique became refined enough for the needs of frontline pilots who encounter environmental extremes such as high altitude, dry air, wind blasts, and G-forces. Shalhorn says good vision is vital for military personnel. Glasses and contact lenses present problems when on a battlefield. Some even say the eye surgery saved their lives. Captain Nicholas Haidt, based at the Miramar Naval Air Station in Southern California, underwent the surgery in 2005. He says life without glasses is much easier. Lieutenant Commander Victor Spears had the surgery in January 2007. He is thrilled with the results. Shalhorn says other military personnel found corrective eye surgery greatly improved their marksmanship. Shalhorn served with the US Navy for 30 years as an F-14 pilot instructor before becoming a military ophthalmologist. Cornea specialist Dr. Robert Mahoney is one of the top LASIK surgeons in the USA. He says Shalhorn single-handedly improved safety for all divisions of the military. Numerous prestigious awards earned him the respect of the entire military. And Shalhorn has also had his brush with fame. The film Top Gun, starring the actor Tom Cruise, was based on his career and that of his men. Shalhorn recently had the chance to be reunited with the screenwriter of Top Gun, Jake Epps. Both said it was a great reunion because of the history between them. Shalhorn has left the Navy, and after a well-earned rest, he is due to set up a private LASIK practice in California. The drug aspirin helps stop particles in the blood from sticking together and forming clots, in effect, thinning the blood. Doctors have known this for years and have used the drug to help patients at risk of heart disease and strokes. But the researchers on a recently completed study wanted to see what effect aspirin had on healthy women. The 24-year study found that regular aspirin users had a 38% lower risk of heart disease and a 12% lower risk of death from cancer. Australian gastroenterologist Neville Yeomans says the study illustrated the benefits of taking aspirin, even for healthy women. In Australia, cardiovascular disease claims 49,000 lives each year. Cardiologist Professor Andrew Sindoni said he believed women over the age of 55, particularly those at risk of cardiovascular disease, should take half an aspirin daily to reduce the risk of heart attack and stroke. Women who are over 60 and had a higher likelihood of heart attacks stand to benefit most, according to the report. Sindoni believes the report will have a big impact on women's health, confirming the benefits of taking aspirin that have already been researched in men. But doctors caution that taking the drug does have side effects. Yeomans said that regularly ingesting aspirin can cause stomach ulcers, which could bleed. But he adds that ulcers can be treated more easily than heart disease. During the study, around 80,000 women in their 40s were monitored for 24 years. A team of horsemen from the Italian city of Perugia is preparing to retrace the Silk Route from Venice to China, explored by Marco Polo in the 13th century. 4 riders, a veterinarian, and 7 horses are set to depart from Venice. The journey is expected to cross a total of 16 sovereign nations, finally finishing in the Chinese capital, Beijing. Before the trip, which is due to depart later this year, there is still a lot to do, including selecting the perfect horses. The journey will be a huge challenge for the horsemen and the horses, and experts from the veterinary medicine department at the University of Perugia are checking a number of horses to test their suitability for the trip. The horses undergo an intensive selection process. The assessments include a 4-step clinical observation in which the horses, preferably from the Italian Maramana breed, undergo a detailed orthopedic examination to check that they are not affected by any lameness. 4-year-old Amira, one of 3 horses chosen so far, is a mix of pure-blood Arab and Italian Maramana. The foot is closely examined to check that the animal does not feel any pain. In the second phase, the horse is examined in motion while walking, trotting and cantering. Professor Fabrizio Ruscia, a veterinarian from the Veterinary Medicine Department at the University of Perugia, says they measure all aspects of a horse's fitness. If they pass the first 2 tests, the horses are then x-rayed and later have medical fitness examinations consisting of aptitude tests and endurance on a treadmill. Piero Lapiana, the leader of the expedition, estimates that 15 months will be enough to cover the journey. The project has been named Mission Prometheus by Piero Lapiana in reference to the Greek mythological character who was honored for stealing fire from the gods and giving it to the mortals for their use, and as a reference to Lapiana's belief in the progress of civilization. Local horsemen will relay the travellers through their nations and escort them to the border of their country, where another local team will greet them and travel with them until the next country. The project will facilitate a cultural exchange between the Italian travellers and the locals from the countries through which they will pass. These include Slovenia, Serbia, Romania, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and finally, China. And another example of scientific animal care comes from Australia. Here, scientists are working with cattle in a new climate change initiative. They're trying to reduce the amount of methane being released into the atmosphere from livestock. These cattle have specially adapted canisters fitted onto their backs. Researchers from the Cooperative Research Centre working near Armidale in the state of New South Wales are monitoring the animal's methane output. They collect samples in the canisters for analysis. It's a serious problem, with the possible worst-case scenario being every kilogram of beef being produced equated to a kilogram of methane being emitted by the livestock. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas. The problem is partially due to Australia's drought. Dry conditions mean that fodder is often not of a high quality and is not digested properly. When feed is properly digested, it comes out in a more solid form. But when poor quality feed is used, gut bacteria react with the undigested feed to produce methane. 10 to 12% of methane being emitted into the atmosphere in Australia comes from livestock, and 95% of that comes from the mouths of the cattle, with different breeds having varying rates of methane production. The aim of the research is to get the methane emissions down by controlled supplementary feeding and genetics. The Orsay Museum is a popular tourist destination in Paris and houses a collection of art from 1848 to 1914. It houses works by artists such as Edgar Degas, Paul Gauguin and Claude Monet, amongst others. At the moment, the museum on the banks of the Seine River is shrouded in scaffolding as experts paint it, rebuild corroded metalwork and restore pollution-stained stonework. The touch-ups on the facade are part of broader renovations that are expected to cost upward of 12.4 million euros. Museum director Serge Lemoine says the museum is housed in a unique building. The museum, originally a train station with an attached hotel, was built by architect Victor Laloux for the 1900 World's Fair in Paris. Cleaning the building is not always easy because of its age and fragility. In addition to cleaning the exterior, researchers have gone on a search for the building's roots. For the museum's opening in 1986, architects painted the building's metal accents in pale blue-green, giving the museum its unusual look, a mixture of imposing stone and delicate metalwork. Recent laboratory tests showed that the metal accents were in fact painted in beige and wood hues when the original train station opened in 1900. It is now being painted back to its original colours. Before the metalwork is painted, however, it must be restored, and that is happening at the Société Métallurgique des Forêts, the SMF. Sebastian Nito, a worker at SMF, says he is proud to be restoring such a fine building. The exercise is a peculiar combination of industrial archaeology, engineering and metallurgy. This is design and construction technology of the same vintage as the Eiffel Tower. The metal accents and design features that decorate the outside of the building have been removed and are being restored and reinforced before being put back into place. In the whole building, there are around 12,000 metric tons of metallic structure and 35,000 square meters of glass. The in-house architect for the Orsay Museum, Virginia Fienga, says she thinks the museum itself is a work of art. During World War II, the building became a mailing centre. Then later, it temporarily housed a theatre troupe and an auction house. Finally, in 1977, the French president, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, gave the order to turn the Orsay into a museum. Restoration work on the Quai Anatole France facade of the Orsay Museum started in August 2006 and is due to be completed very soon. To enable pedestrians to use the riverside promenade while work continues, a covered walkway has been erected, and the museum has remained open during the restoration process. As well as restoring the sculptures and metal canopies, the work involves cleaning the stonework and facings. Scaffolding has been set up on the riverfront facade in 4 sections. The Orsay Museum houses a huge collection of mostly French art from the Impressionists. In addition, there are exhibitions of furniture, sculpture and photography, all from roughly the same period as the building itself. Much of the building's exterior detail was not just in need of restoration, but had actually been lost beneath layers of paint, grime, and rust. Restorers are confident the architectural detail will now be exactly as it was when the original Orsay railway station opened in 1900. The building will soon be seen by Parisians in its original garb. In the hills of Hebei province, a few hours' drive north of Beijing, the residents are experiencing changes to their landscape. This area used to be green grasslands with flowing rivers. Now, the sands from the deserts in Inner Mongolia to the north of the region are spreading with the wind. The sand is flowing down this valley as it heads towards Beijing, and local resident Mrs. Lee's house is in the way. Mrs. Lee lives in Langtugao, a village of 230 people near the border of Inner Mongolia. A few times a week, Mrs. Lee climbs up to the level of her rooftop and shovels the sand away from her home. Her house is the northernmost in the village and takes the brunt of the sand deposits. Every day, more sand gathers around her house. Like many in this village, Mrs. Lee takes the problem in her stride. She says she shovels the sand away because there is not much else she can do to stop it burying her house. Mrs. Lee has lived here all her life and says the sand started coming about 15 or 20 years ago, and it has been getting drier ever since. Langtugao experiences dust storms around 9 months of the year. so sand has become a way of life for the villagers. They wear masks to avoid breathing it in and wrap their heads with hoods or scarves to keep the grit out of their ears and hair. Some 27% of China is desert, and this area of desert land is growing. Beijing used to average 1 or 2 dust storms every 7 years in the 1950s, but in the last 15 years, they have become an annual problem. Last April, 300,000 tons of sand dusted Beijing in just one night. The villagers now have to dig deeper and deeper wells in order to get drinking water and water for their livestock. They carry the water to their houses on shoulder poles and in pails. Before the sands, they just walked the cows down to the river. Climate change is commonly acknowledged to be the main cause of the expanding deserts, but local causes are a factor as well. The grasslands here were never fertile enough to support the number of people, goats, sheep, cattle and agriculture that have appeared to compete for water and soil. Mrs. Lee says it wasn't always like this, and once the local rivers ran with water, but now they are dry. Where cattle used to drink and children swim, there are just flowing banks of sand. Thousands of hectares of grassland were lost to soil erosion in Inner Mongolia last year. Mrs. Lee says the government has been trying to help. Grazing the herds of sheep and goats is restricted during certain times of the year, and there are slogans posted around the village. The government also pays villagers to plant trees in the local area. It is now almost impossible to rear cattle. The number of livestock moving onto the land is too great for the grasslands. Many places have been chewed bare by the herds of sheep and goats. To protect the grassland and try to stave off the desert, the Chinese government has limited the grazing of open grasslands to certain times of the year, and families are restricted in cutting firewood to give trees time to recover and regrow. In this field, farmers are planting saplings. They grow fast, and their roots reach deep. Many of them are bound for Beijing, where they will help the city look green for the 2008 Olympics. But others will be kept here in Fengning County. China is working to plant a 4,500-kilometre border of green belts between the deserts and the cities to act as buffers.